welcome to the Movieception Show. I am Fariba. We're just about to watch the 7th episode of Andor. So, if you all remember from the last episode, a lot went down. They had their own heist, and it was definitely a really big turning point in terms of not just what really happens with the Rebel Alliance, but a really big part of Andor's storyline itself. Because we really started to kind of see a different set of Andor or Cassian that we never really seen before. The one that we thought we would associate with Rogue One, only to see that there is definitely a bit more of a nuance to kind of his background and just his own story in general, and kind of how he got to the moment of becoming a rebel himself. And as we saw in the last episode, he definitely did something really selfish. He, only thought about himself, the money, and had no, he didn't really care about the whole situation with the Alliance, the Resistance, nothing like that. He just wants to focus on his own situation at hand because he does have a lot of debt and he does have to think about other things, especially because this series did start off with him searching for his sister, right? So I wonder for this episode we're kind of going to go back to Fez maybe. From the looks of it, maybe that might be kind of the case with where we're going to go in terms of this story going forward. That yes, we just had this heist, but of course the main focus of the story is Cassian Andor and kind of his route to becoming the Rebel Alliance that we would see eventually in Rogue One. So yeah, I'm not gonna go too much in depth about it. So without further ado, let's watch the 7th episode of Andor.
What color? What about it?
Wow.
It's hot.
He might be the antagonist, but he's like literally every other person. Even the worst nightmare.
I don't believe in myself. I am desperate for approval.
I spoke with Emperor Palpatine last night, and he's assured me indirect effect on the Empire will henceforth be granted a Class 1 offence. All prison sentences are immediately re-evaluated. All outstanding.
I explained to you the risk new faces, but you seem to know better. My words.
This is something else entirely.
Turning back will be impossible. You knew where this was going. You've always known. You need the fear. You need them to react.
You can't be serious.
The Empire has been choking us.
You will suffer.
That's the plan. You're not angry with me.
When you think about it, it is kind of smart.
We'll be seeing one way. You can't hide forever.
That's true.
Small jobs at the Bureau of
Oh,
Science.
keep the goals.
I spoke with your uncle. Some sectors might.
At ease.
Yes, sir. Ma'am. Sir.
Your tunic.
Sorry, sir. Ma'am. For which star system?
All star systems.
Is that a problem?
That's a lot of homework.
I'll need this report kept. Where is he?
Oh wow, she
I
changed
should.
quick.
Neither of us should. We have a loose end. Cassian and Andor. He knows them. We need to find him. Find him? We can't have him walking around with Luthen in his head. You mean kill him? This is what revolution looks like. Well, we'll send you what we have on him.
Yeah, he is. He's back home. Welcome home. Oh, at least he gets to reunite with his mother.
Cassian!
Since we moved up the north.
Since we look. Oh,
Yeah, why not? What do we need to take but the three of us? Get out of the cold of time. Find somewhere warm and easy. I can make it happen. It's all gonna be different now.
oh, he called her mom. Which could be a double entendre, but it's okay.
Have I changed so much?
We will act with that.
Is it that bad?
I Just a glimpse of what it's like and what you have to do.
Smile. I'm glad you're not, dear. I should extend my hand towards the man at your throat. You're better off not now. Or perhaps you find my politics a bit strong for your taste. Darren's on his way over. He knows none of this. He's not to be trusted.
Oh, okay.
Smile.
There you are. Reminiscing, aren't we? School days?
Got me planning over that one.
This is the last place you should be.
I think those were his exact words.
It's not safe. You need to get as far away from here as you can.
Shit.
I will. I am. You won't have to worry about me anymore.
Dang.
And he needs to forget about me. And that goes for everybody.
I was coming to find you.
Here I am. You haven't done much packing.
She says we can't go.
Be quiet.
What's left to keep you here?
The rebellion.
Why?
Ferrix has been hiding long enough.
So now you're taking on the Empire.
Across the square with a smile on my face. If there are heroes brave enough to take on a whole Imperial garrison, I'm brave enough to stick it out here. I don't expect you to understand. Nothing you can do about that. I've never loved anything the way I love you. And I've never fed on anything more, but this time you can't stay and stop searching for your sister. It's a fantasy. There are no survivors in Canary. What happened there is not your responsibility. You were a child. Let it go.
Coming back.
It's dangerous. Be careful of my work going forward.
Careful? Is that your defense? You've been careful? I'd be curious how many people at this table would think it careful if you found a way to access our sector data without ever filing a request.
I'm wondering where we'd be right now if everyone here showed the same endeavour as Supervisor Mira. I'll have to think about it. For the moment, I'm reassigning the Morlana sector to Supervisor Mira. Felix is of great interest to her, and it's merely become a distraction for you. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
Watch your back.
Oh.
Doing?
Okay.
Washing up. Gonna take a walk.
So that's where he was relocated.
After he's up to date, she'll be open.
Oh!
No, I'm on my way to the store.
You need to back up. Stand right there.
Oh.
You look like you're sweating.
Well, it's hot.
Or you've been running.
Why would I be running?
Because you're a part of it.
I can wait for you here if you want.
Rescuers,
What?
you heard me.
Wait, no.
Oh!
I'm not doing here. I'm a tourist.
Tourists don't run.
Wait, what is he? No, this is great.
Hang on to this one for me. I want to check the show through.
Darling! Darling,
apologies all round then. This used to be a 6-month sentence. 6 years.
Oh, 6 years.
No, wait!
That was the 7th episode of Andor, and we're basically seeing essentially the consequences of everything that's happened from the heist that happened in the last episode. So, again, we're definitely seeing a part of Cassian that we've never really seen before, someone who's just really thinking about himself and kind of his own absorbing sort of person who just has no concern for the Rebel Alliance or anything like that, right? He just wants to keep things on his own, which is, again, when you think about it in like in the general sense, like, it's really interesting how this is the Cassian that we see now compared to the Cassian that we'll eventually see in Rogue One. And one of the things that we're kind of seeing a really big part of this episode is kind of the genesis of the Rebel Alliance, right? Because at this point, it's kind of rising, but it hasn't gotten to the point where it's really getting to its turning point, or I guess you could say kind of their strongest suit. Like eventually, like of course, like for them to really rise to the occasion, they really need the funds to really, be a powerful resistance group that would eventually go up against the Galactic Empire in this case. And that's just something, and I'll go kind of a bit more into kind of the more historical, like the historical influences of it, but where this heist is a really big turning point for the Rebel Alliance, something that we never really seen before, at least in terms of kind of the Star Wars lore that we've seen, where because of this heist, it's becoming this huge big turning point for them, where essentially there are going to be people who are going to learn about it. They're going to realize that if anybody like these rebels can come up and go after the Empire in ways that kind of tarnish them in a way, kind of showing the weak spot, then that's giving a bit more courage, or giving this, allowing people to feel a bit more brave about, or even more fearless about how they feel about their own stance against Empire, especially anybody who definitely felt like, they weren't with the Empire, they never really, meshed with them, and definitely felt like their own ideologies were not aligned with the Empire, right? Like there are people who, as we mentioned before, the kid from the last episode, he's always about the freedom. He's fighting for his freedom. He wants his own choice. He doesn't want to, suck up to some higher power just for the heck of it, because somebody, wants to dictate everyone, right? And there's of course people like in the Star Wars world where they do have their own mind, they have their own decision making, they want their own free will, and we're seeing kind of essentially a lot of this breaking down a lot in this episode, especially where we see Marva, where essentially Cassian does meet up with her, even though he wants to, leave with her and go somewhere where they can, be free from the Empire, whatever. You can tell just from the effects of this heist that there's a lot more people in support of the rebellion. There's people who feel like, oh, if the rebellion is finally kind of getting to a point where they're about to, rise up, then there's going to be people who are going to start, rebelling against the Empire. That's as we saw with Marva, where it's like, yeah, Marva's not going to hide, she's going to fight, basically. And she's kind of the example, or she's just exemplifies basically kind of the people who are now feeling a lot more comfortable with, okay, well, not comfortable, but a bit more, they're not as fearsome or are not as fearful of the Empire as they used to be. Now they actually want to stand up and fight for essentially their rights, in a sense. And I think one of the things you have to also really appreciate with this whole show is kind of showing how it basically kind of going into the more everyday life of people, just normal, ordinary people who aren't the Jedis, who aren't the Siths, just ordinary people who are just, minding their own business, trying to work, and in a sense where they see somebody with higher power kind of telling them what to do, essentially. We're kind of seeing how people are fighting back, and in a sense when you look at this, it does kind of reflect on more of, and even recent climates of everything like that. I think in this episode particularly, we see a lot more of the politics kind of being, not kind of, but the politics became a big part of this episode, kind of showing how people are thinking, what their thoughts are. We're seeing with Mon Mothma reaching out to a banker to figure out a way to get access to her funds that, of course, the Empire has been keeping an eye on. And then not just that, but she apparently does have an ally who has a stronger politics. And we're seeing everyone is having their own view, their own politics, their own ideologies of what they feel that they should have. Again, a lot of the discussion about free will becoming a big, big part of this whole episode that we're seeing right here. And we're basically seeing, again, the genesis of the Rebel Alliance really rising up now that this heist has happened, and a lot of people are really starting to believe in the cause now, which is a really big point for them, and that's why they did this whole. They probably executed this whole plan for a reason. We even see Luthen basically telling Mons like, "Hey, we waited. We need this moment because this will kind of scare the Empire. The Empire will do something that we essentially need for to really get our stuff done and get our message across." And that's exactly what the Empire has done. They've basically, taken the trap where now, okay, they're going to take these extreme measures. Well, and in this case, we're seeing a lot of the politics play out where if it means that some people have to get hurt, that'll probably be the only way to, for the Rebel Alliance to really start, picking up and becoming a much more powerful entity. And that's what they're essentially doing with it. And this is where the politics comes in, where it's like, well, people are going to lose, people are going to win, people are going to benefit. And we're really seeing that happening, not just with the Empire, but really with the Rebel Alliance as well, which shows you that with anything that happens, there's kind of a cost to everything. And how if they want to reach a certain goal, that there isn't going to be this happy story for every scenario, right? There's going to be some sort of drawback that's going to happen. Some of the consequences are going to arise where it's just something you can't control. There's always going to be people who are going to get hurt no matter which side you're on, but it's essentially the sacrifice of that you're willing to make if it means trying to fight for a cause. So that's what we're seeing a lot of breaking down in this episode. Yes, again, it's not like an episode, like it's not like the last episode where we saw like huge action sequence or anything like that. We didn't really get to see that, of course, but again, we're seeing more of just the dialogue, the character development, just looking through the perspective of the people in, the Star Wars universe who aren't, again, the Jedi, Sith. They aren't anything like that. These are just ordinary people trying to mind their own business, essentially. And that's something that we never really, this is coming from the fact that, like, we have always seen Jedi. We've always seen Siths. We've always seen, people with higher power essentially taking a bulk of the story in Star Wars. And here it's like, okay, we're finally getting to a point where we can kind of let all that pass and allow us to focus more on just the everyday life of people that we don't usually really see in Star Wars. And we're finally getting this opportunity to really see their own world. And I think the more you watch it, the more you also start to understand how you see similarities of their world to our world, which I probably would assume is inspiration of it. Again, there's a couple of things I do catch on, like for the fact that, we're seeing a bit more of a systematic situation going on with the Empire. Again, we're going into more of like the everyday life that we don't just see with the Rebel Alliance. We're also kind of seeing with the Empire as well. So we're definitely seeing two different point of views of just very different entities who have different ideologies. And of course, the Empire is the worst case of it all because they are a bit more, in a sense, fascist, whereas the rebels just want their own free will. And yet we're also kind of seeing similarities where everybody's just doing their own jobs. They have their own everyday life, and they're just trying to do what they think is best for them. So, and again, we're just seeing a lot of that, a lot of the politics that are transpiring in this show. Something that we also see in real life as well, which is kind of really insane. Like I was really starting to pinpoint a lot of these similarities, just like, oh, this is something that you would see in a real world situation as well. And it just shows that, like, there's always going to be this, these consequences in terms of what's going on, especially when it comes to the political sense of the world. And again, this is a show that is really, really heavy in terms of the political thriller. Again, it's really dialogue heavy. It's very character, driven. It's very story focused. But I think that that's really important in terms of just trying to show Cassian's, you know, character development, showing how he went from this, thief who really didn't care about anything to eventually becoming to reaching a point of his life where he does care about the Rebel Alliance and wants to make a difference for the world and fight for basically other people and not just think about himself. And right now, again, we are in that part of the phase where essentially, yeah, he's just thinking about himself. He's just, trying to live the most of his life. And now we're definitely gone to a very, very crucial point where he's now been arrested. He's now charged and in prison for 6 years. What does this mean for him? But the fact that this is an episode where we definitely got a reference to K2SO, which is really interesting because I didn't think we were gonna get K2SO this early on in the show. I didn't even expect it was gonna happen at all this season. I thought it was gonna be something that was gonna happen in season 2. So I wonder if this is kind of alluding to the fact that we might be, seeing that whole friendship brewing in some way, because it's a really awkward way to do it. But that was a version of K2SO, or that was kind of the same droids of K2SO. So I wonder what that would mean. We do have about 4 more episodes after this. So maybe that's something they're going to leave till the end. I don't know about that, but that was a subtle nod to Rogue One right there, because I was just like, that looks like K2SO4, but I don't think that was that particular one. Maybe it is. That would be really interesting. That means that we might get Alec Tudyk after all. I don't know. But that was definitely a really great reference right there. Again, I appreciate the fact that, again, this isn't a show. And again, I didn't really expect that a version or droids of K2SO were going to, show up. But again, I didn't anticipate it. That wasn't my reaction to it. I wasn't even expecting it. I'm more focused on just seeing how Cassian grows as a character, seeing his origins, understanding who he is, what he does, and just understanding his motivation for everything that happens, right? And I mean, there's even one part where Marva is just saying, hey, let whatever happened in Canary, let it go. Your sister ain't alive, which I wonder what that implies. Is it true that no one else has survived aside from him? Because we don't really know what happened in Canary aside from the fact that the usual sense is, well, if the Empire ended up in the planet, there's no way that anybody who was still inhabited there would have survived. And Cassian was just a lucky one who, was picked up by 2 other thieves and was able to, run off. So then it's the question of, well, is it really true that Cassian's sister has, perished with the rest of them? Is he really the only survivor from that planet? There's lots of questions, just kind of going into just this whole show. And even with 4 episodes, it keeps you curious about, okay, what is the truth? What is going on? What it really has happened? What has not happened? Definitely something that keeps me intrigued with everything, with this whole story that we're seeing from Cassian's perspective. But yeah, no, I think that this is a pretty good episode. I mean, is it the greatest? It's not, but it definitely keeps the story going a lot. I mean, for one thing, we see, I can't remember, Mex or Bex or something like that, but we see that, Rex or something like that, she's now arrived in Coruscant, and we definitely see a whole different side of her, and not the person that we saw back in, the last 3 episodes where she was just essentially creating this plan. We see somebody who is literally in high society type of person that's okay, wow, I did not expect that transformation. But yeah, lots of questions going on in this series. I mean, I wonder where Cassian's going to go from there. But that's really what I have to say about this episode. I think it's a really good one in terms of just setting up, again, the pace, building up from what happened from the last episode, giving us a perspective of what the effects are, just essentially the consequences of that heist, and what that means for not just Cassian's story, but also showing us a glimpse of how the origins of the Rebel Alliance came to be, and just seeing how that has affected not just Cassian but basically everyone around him. And we're seeing how more and more that's not just developing Cassian's story, but also kind of the rise of the Rebel Alliance. And I can't wait to see more that's going to happen from here on out. It's really unfortunate that not a lot of people are watching the series, because it is truly fascinating. It's a lot better than some of the things that we've seen before with Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think this is a show that's really been consistent, at least in the storytelling, its tone, showing this greediness, but also this political thriller type of, you know, type of atmosphere, this approach to it. And I wish that more people would watch it. But yeah, let me know what you think of this episode. Did you enjoy just seeing more of the day-to-day lifestyle that we're seeing from people, just, you know, of people of ordinary lifestyle, right? What are your thoughts about, you know, Cassian's story moving forward? Is this what you anticipated for where Cassian would be heading towards? And same thing with Rebel Alliance. This is what you would have expected for essentially the origins for them. What do you think is going to happen moving forward? What do you think about this whole droid that we've seen that happens to look like K2SO? Does that imply about anything, or is that just kind of being a bit of a gimmick or a fan service-ish type of thing? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.